Let me bring in my think tank tonight. Joining us in Dubuque, Iowa, criminal defense attorney Brian Spanagel. In studio, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Dana Pagan. Michael Bixon, criminal defense attorney, and Tiffany Porter as well. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. Let me begin in studio. Are you surprised that the accident theory is like gone?
I'm very surprised. I mean, to close off what seems to be a very easy avenue to at least explore during the trial, to me means that there is no way that they could have some type of expert witness take the stand and say this was an accident. There's no other way, right? Because if I were him, I'd bring on some type of forensic evidence to say otherwise, that say, yes, this could have been, some type of accident. But they've closed that whole avenue off.
Are you surprised they couldn't find an expert that could say that? And when I say find, I mean find an expert who could say that?
Honestly, I am. Because look, is it a possibility, and it might be a remote possibility, but is it a possibility that she could have slipped, fallen, gone up, fallen again? Anything can happen. Crazier things certainly have happened. I'm surprised they closed off that avenue so early, and that now they're saying this is somebody else that did it. And I think the jurors are now primed, and they're going to want to know who did it.
Who did it?
Well, I think it spins back to, it makes her look more like the bad guy in this case. I mean, if this is her boyfriend that killed her, this is this poor suffering man who's been through multiple episodes of her cheating on him, and then this other man comes in and that's what happens. I think it makes her look, it's like she kind of got her comeuppance in a way from the way they're playing it.
Well, if they're going to point the finger in other places, then we got to hear from some of these people, right?
Right, but I think that it's good for the defense to close that off because you leave it open. We know she fell twice on the rape. No, I mean, so you have to go ahead and have an admission that yes, we agree that this is a homicide, but he didn't do it, of course, because if not, there's too many holes. I mean, how can you, like you said, six
minus
holes?
4 equals murder.
Right.
Brian, you're there in Iowa. Are you surprised with what happened today? The fact that this now is a whodunit?
I am, Vinny. I was sitting in the courtroom and I watched that and I thought, wow, he just closed off that loophole. What I would have liked to see is more about reasonable doubt. Tell me, if you're going to close this loophole, tell me exactly why there's reasonable doubt in this case.
Yeah, and you start talking about who could have done it. And today in court, they showed the murder weapon. It was put into evidence. Let's take a look at that corn rake. I think we've got some video of it. And this is a large tool. Now, there's part of the handle is broken. A lot of people were noticing that today. It's not clear when it was broken. But if someone else did it, should someone be checking that thing for DNA?
Fingerprints, something?
Right?
Right.
Sounds reasonable.
Well, should the defense do it? Does the defense have any obligation to maybe check it for evidence as well?
They might not want to.
Right.
No, it's not their job to prove the case. It's the state's case
Right.
to prove. It's not my job as a defense attorney to then come up with someone else who could have committed the homicide. This is not Quincy.
Wait a minute. You're willing to, in a whodunit, say it was somebody else? I don't know who it was, and I'm not going to, could have. I don't know who it was, but it definitely wasn't this guy over here with the motive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with it. It's not my job to prove who it is. Now, of course, you want to put out maybe some outliers of who it could be and hint at that with whoever you put on the stand, but it's not my job to prove the case. It's not my job. They should have done a better investigation.
Hey, Brian, what are the expectations of jurors in Iowa? I've never tried a case out there. Do you think they're going to want to hear a little something from the defense about who else could have possibly done this?
I think the jurors in Iowa are going to want to hear exactly why there's reasonable doubt. I think they're going to want the defense to be very honest with their case. Appear to be very honest, very straightforward. They're going to want to know what the facts are. They're going to want to know why there's reasonable doubt, and they're going to want to have an opportunity to deliberate those facts and deliver a fair verdict.
Juries are different in different places. I think there's more skepticism, like in the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, where we practice, Tiffany, right, where you're from originally. And in Iowa, maybe way different here. At the end of the day, that's the honesty, though. I mean, to me, that was an honest position to take because I personally thought that the accident version was absurd. Absurd.
And again, that very well might be the case. But by excluding it so early and by being so adamant that this is a murder, they're going to want to know who did it.
All right, well, we're going to talk about who some of those folks could potentially be. We've got some evidence photos. We have those evidence photos today. Let's take a look. Let's take a little tour of the area here, because this is absolutely significant in the case. And they're kind of doing it the old-fashioned way, passing pictures around. And this is I think that's the red barn there. You look in here, this is the office where he was taking that drink, the door you could see there. These pictures are flying by quickly. But as we move through, I'm not sure, that's probably the building. Here you get to see all the hogs. And this is a big farm. They make a lot of money. He's worth a lot of money. One of the reasons why the prosecution says he doesn't want the divorce, doesn't want to lose half of all of this. And again, this is somewhere inside. I'm not exactly sure where this was, because we're not seeing the evidence photos put up on some sort of screen when they're published to the jury. They're actually handed to the jury. Old school. What do you think of that? When was the last time you handed things to a jury?
I mean, it happens still.
still do.
Yeah.
You still do it?
I haven't done it in a while. The last time I saw it was in a really grisly murder, and we didn't want to put the pictures up, or the DA's office didn't want to put the pictures up because it was just too much. It was a child who had been murdered, but otherwise.
I like to sit the pictures right there in front of the jury and have it sit on the ledge so they can keep looking at it.
Or hand it to them right before the other person goes up and have them looking at it while they're asking questions.
So we're talking about a big area here in the farm, and this is the office. Now, he takes a break at least once, maybe twice. His son, his 13-year-old son at the time, to get some water. That's the only time he's separated from his father. That's the only opportunity for this murder. And I'm wondering, that time frame has not been really established as to how long it is. The testimony is basically, I don't know how long it was. And there you see where he would have been working on the left, the office is to the right. One of the exits that's closest to where the murder took place, you would exit through the office to get out. Yet, we don't know how long. So how does that play? Let me begin with Brian in Dubuque, Iowa. You said, Brian, that this Iowa jury is going to want straightforward, they're going to want facts, they're going to want to figure this out. But prosecutors were not able to put a specific time frame, or not even an estimation of a time frame of how long the defendant's son was away from his father, where his father would have had an opportunity to commit this murder. We have no idea if it was a minute or if it was 30 minutes. Is that a problem?
I think it's a problem for the prosecution that they couldn't put a time frame on it. I think it's a problem that the kid, he came back after, said it was a minute and 40 seconds, and then he changed his story, but they couldn't say how long, and they couldn't eliminate the fact that he only went and got a drink of water twice. Do you really have time to commit a murder if that time period is getting a drink of water? I think that the prosecution really needs to stretch out how long the dad was gone for.
Yeah, they've got to figure out a way to do it, because I'm telling you, I'm watching this trial. I watched it and I watched it again, listened to that testimony. I have no idea what that time frame is. When we come back, we're going to hear more from the key witness in the case. He is the one in the middle. A 14-year-old boy testified today. We'll listen to what he said coming up.
Tristan, at any point on November 10th, 2018, prior to you finding your mother, did you see Taylor and Wyatt outside?
No.
So you saw nobody else outside but you, your mom, and your dad?
Yes.
And Tristan, did you do anything to hurt your mom that day?
No.
You were never with your mom in the red shed until you actually found her?
Yes.
That was Tristan, the 13, now 14-year-old son of the victim and the defendant. And there you saw a prosecutor asking him whether or not he did anything. Remember what the defense is here. Somebody else did it. So who else was on the farm that day? Well, he was. Let me bring back in my think tank. Do you think it's even possible or plausible that any juror might think that Tristan was responsible for this?
Jurors can think anything. Anything, anytime. I don't think it's completely out of line that some juror is going to get this wild thought that it was
Not
the
at all.
child.
And it's not even, look, you know, it's nothing that we don't want to think it. We don't want to put it on him. But it's certainly possible. And we heard it come from the prosecution. We heard it come from the defense. both questions oriented at whether or not it was possible that he might have been involved in this in some way. So yeah, it is possible, just no one really wants to go down that avenue because it's a very hard road to go down.
Yeah. Do you think the defense could even argue that or would attempt to? No.
That's terrible. It's terrible to even insinuate that this 14-year-old had something to do with his mom's murder. I mean, I think that's just deplorable to even talk about it in court or to even hint at it. I mean, then you got to prove some kind of motive for that. And why would he do that? I mean, the defense would have to crush him. And that's horrible. I would never do that
But as a
to a
prosecutor,
kid.
you have to ask that because you have to foreclose that. Now they've raised this other person. Who's the other person there? I think as a prosecutor, you at least have to ask that question, close it off, and have it in evidence that the defense can't argue, well, he didn't say he didn't do it.
Well, maybe the jury will then begin, oh, they're just fishing. They're trying to pin it on anyone. So you have to watch that as well, because then they may say, well, they don't really have such a great case. And now they're trying to pin it on the 14-year-old.
Now, the other important part of the son's testimony is all about the time. You know, motive, yes. We think that's pretty clear in this case. You've got a cheating spouse. You've got a lot of money at stake. Maybe you don't want to get the divorce, right? So there's a potential motive that you could argue as a prosecutor. But is there opportunity? Is there that window of time where he's away from his son? Take a listen.
Now, did you meet with your attorney right after that deposition?
Yes.
And that's when you indicated to your attorney that you would like that information regarding the timing was inaccurate.
Yes.
And do you know, did you ask your attorney to tell myself and the defense attorney that?
Yes.
And as you sit here today, do you know how much time you were away from your dad in that hour and a half in the hog barn?
No.
As you indicated earlier, were you wearing a watch?
No.
Were you paying attention to the time?
No.
Tristan, was this entire day a traumatic day for you?
Yes.
And neither side asked for any sort of an estimate, like was it more than a half hour? Was it less than a half hour? 15 minutes, more or less? That didn't happen. Brian, why didn't that happen? Why didn't either side in this case try to at least give this jury some level of an estimation of how long he was away from his father getting a drink?
Well, I think if you're on the defense side, the minute 40 that was given before, that's the anchor. I wouldn't want to do anything to disrupt that anchor right there. Minute 40, I'm going to let the jurors think, well, it could have been less. A drink happens fastly. If I'm on the prosecutor's side, if I'm prosecuting this case, I'm thinking to myself, well, what's the kid going to say? Or maybe he gave an unfavorable answer before when I interviewed him. So I don't want to get that out because I don't know the answer.
Yeah, here's the problem I have with that, and prosecutors should be seeking the truth. So if I'm a prosecutor, yes, I want to win the case. I believe I have a theory, but at the end of the day, this is my witness. I've got to give the jury the information. They didn't ask even for an estimation of time.
I think it was a missed opportunity.
For who?
For both, actually. I mean, I think in one way, look, for the prosecution, yeah, they need to prove it, and I think that it leaves it open now to maybe it was less, but it also could have been more, and I think the defense should have been doing a little bit more to close that loophole off and to say, no, it really was closer to what he said the first time.
Well, and the prosecution should have been prepping their witness. They should know the answer to that question before they ask it. If he's come back and said,
well,
no,
he was
I
deposed
wrong.
a few days ago, and he changed the answer from the deposition, and so
Right, but when he comes back and says, oh, I was wrong, then you get into those questions. Well, how long was it? Was it more? Was it less? You have to narrow that down. You have to know your witness before you get him up there, and you can't be scared of the answer. Like you said,
it is what it is.
Right.
It is what it is. I mean, the facts are what they are. People are going to testify about what they testified to. This is the most important piece of information in this case.
It is. It is. And I think that the defense missed an opportunity to really hone in on that because as on the defense side, I'm going to argue that there wasn't enough time. It wasn't enough time to do to commit the crime. And they should have just honed in on that more. And I think that would have helped them better, especially with this witness. And he's saying, I don't know. Well, give me an estimation. What do you think? I mean, they didn't explore that at all. And I think that's going to hurt them later.
All right, when we come back, we said the defense completely changed the nature of this trial, turning it into a whodunit. So who are all the people involved in this case? When we come back, we'll go through the people who were there, the people who were involved in the lives of the defendant and the victim. All that when we return. What a wild day one in Dubuque, Iowa. It's the case against Todd Mullis. He's been accused of murdering his wife with a corn rake. So today, the defense turning the case upside down because the defendant initially was talking about this being an accident. But the defense is saying, no, it's not an accident. This was a murder. It's just you got the wrong guy here. Somebody else did it. So who else could have done it? Well, I want to take some time now to kind of introduce you to some of the characters involved in this case and in the lives of the defendant and the victim here. And let's begin with the victim, Amy Mullis. Maureen Hughes, who was the prosecutor in this case, spoke about her. And this is a woman, again, who's involved in some extramarital affairs, but has been married to the defendant, and they have 3 beautiful children together. Take a listen to the prosecutor.
Amy Mullis was a young and beautiful woman. She was 39 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a friend, and a mother to her 3 young children. She was at her home on November 10th, 2018, and went outside to help do some work on her farm. But little did she know, her death would come that morning. In Amy's last moments on this earth, she would feel the corn rake that she was stabbed with in her back. She would feel that rake pierce her body. She would collapse to the ground. Her lungs would fill with blood and air. And she would take those last breaths while she lay on a floor in a shed on her farm. Amy had so much life left to live, but that life was viciously taken from her on November 10th, 2018, taken at the hands of this defendant. We would love for you to get to meet Amy, but you won't. Instead, you will share a courtroom with her killer.
And then you've got the defendant, who is the husband of Amy Mullis. You've got Todd Mullis. He's the defendant on trial here. He's the father of 3 children. But this is a man who knows that his wife in 2013 had been cheating on him. Take a listen to his attorney describe the defendant to the jury.
I believe you'll hear testimony from Todd that his marriage was important. His children were important. The farm life was important to him. But not so important that he's going to murder the mother of his children and his wife. There will be sometimes perhaps confusing text messages, phone contacts, or information about what was said by Amy. But I think you will find that Todd continued to work towards maintaining his marriage throughout all this confusion. But behind his back, Amy was having a significant sexual affair with someone who actually came to the farm on a regular basis. A gentleman by the name of Jerry Frazier.
And the finger pointing begins. Now, Amy and Todd have a son who testified today. His name is Tristan, the oldest of the 3 children. And let me tell you about this young man, 13 years old at the time, 14 in court today. He's a big kid, drives the family truck, knows how to drive the truck, works the farm, super mature, very bright. And today, he took the stand.
Did you then walk to the red shed or red barn?
Yes.
At that point, was anybody else on the farm?
No.
Where did you go then?
I went to the barn.
What did you see when you walked in?
My mom.
And where was your mom at?
She was just inside the door.
And what position was she in?
She was kind of on her hands and knees, face down.
What did you do?
I yelled for my dad.
Did you see anything that was protruding or sticking out of your mom's body?
Yes.
What did you see?
Corn rake
And where was that at in relation to your mom's body?
in her center back, probably somewhere around there.
At that point, was your mom responsive?
No.
Did you do anything to see if she was?
Yes.
What did you do?
I checked for a pulse on her neck and her arm, and I put my finger, or my index and my middle finger, under her nose to see if she was, if there was breath.
Now, at that point, I think you indicated that's when you called for your dad.
Yes.
What happened then?
He started running over.
All right, Brian Spanigal is with us. He's at the courthouse in Iowa. Brian, is there any chance that you believe these jurors from Iowa may believe that a 13-year-old boy committed this murder, the son of the victim?
Absolutely not. There's no way that these jurors are going to think that the son committed the murder. If anything, what they're going to be thinking is that somebody else committed the murder. Maybe there was some jealousy between one of the people who she was having an affair with and a previous affair.
Absolutely, and then we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Someone else that's involved in this entire case is the mother of the defendant, who is the mother-in-law of the victim, and there she is. And what exactly was her interaction with the family here? Well, we got some testimony today from the victim's brother, Jeff Fuller, talking about Todd's mother. Take a listen.
And what specifically did Amy tell you during that conversation?
During the conversation, after she'd gotten home, she went to pick up her kids from her mother-in-law, and she said that her mother-in-law was talking very negatively at her, telling her that Amy had been abandoning her children and didn't deserve to be a mother and was just a horrible person.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the defendant's mother here, the victim's mother-in-law, not happy with Amy Mullis. Does she come into play here in this defense theory that somebody else could have done it?
I don't see that.
I mean, based on what I've seen so far, it would be a stretch. So there was a bad relationship between her and an in-law. That's not exactly unheard of. I would need something more. I need something more, saying some type of threat, something that she's done physically, something to get past just a dislike to murder.
Okay, so would you eliminate her as a potential object of having of the defense perhaps pointing the finger in that direction?
Yes, I would definitely eliminate her. But again, if I'm the defense, I'm not going to go on this wild goose chase trying to find out who did it. It's not their job, and they need to just continue to raise reasonable doubt and do what they need to do for their client. Do not go fishing for who did it. It's not your concern.
All right, let's take a look at someone else who's involved in all this. And this person was actually mentioned by the defense in their opening statement. This is the victim's boyfriend. His name is Jerry Frazier. And we believe he's going to testify. We believe he's going to talk about having plans and a relationship with the victim up until the end of her life, that this was an ongoing affair. Take a listen to what the prosecutor had to say about this.
You'll find that Todd continued to work towards maintaining his marriage throughout all this confusion. But behind his back, Amy was having a significant sexual affair with someone who actually came to the farm on a regular basis. A gentleman by the name of Jerry Frazier. In the spring of 2018, it became a flirting thing, and then it became a sexual thing. And it was extensive, that he and Amy would meet at various locations at various times, and it was sexual.
All right, obviously that was the defense talking about it, but how about the prosecution here? Does the prosecution have to establish through this witness an alibi for him at the time of the murder?
I'm sorry, you were saying, does the prosecution have to establish an alibi?
To eliminate him as a potential suspect in all of this.
I mean, they want to try to close it off as much as they can. I mean, you know, to them, I think it's
Do they
more
need to
about...
alibi him?
Yes, they do.
Let this jury know exactly where he was during that hour-and-a-half window when she was murdered.
Yes. They'll need to do that, need to establish it so that way we can say, hey, it wasn't the, what do you call it, man?
Victim's boyfriend.
Victim's boyfriend. I was thinking mistress. But yeah, the victim's boyfriend, so that you can eliminate him and move on and get back to the husband and paint him as the person that was enraged. And this, think about it, the victim's boyfriend was there from time to time. That's what the defense is trying to say.
He's familiar with the farm. He's been to the farm before.
Right.
And I think what Tiffany's saying makes sense, but I think at the same time, as a prosecutor, you don't want to chase that forever. You want to get in, get out if you're going to do it, and you need.
But you have to get it done, don't you?
I think you do. I mean,
You can't
once
leave
that's
it out
raised,
there.
right? I mean, you can't just let it dangle out there because there's your reasonable doubt if you just let it sit.
I think if you do get that alibi out there, I think your case is that much tighter, but I don't necessarily think you have to have it. I think that the defense can explore it, obviously, and it's to a great advantage to them if the prosecution is unable to do that. But do they absolutely need to? Not if they have enough evidence against the defendant in this case.
Brian, what do you think here? Do you think that the prosecution has to put him on the stand and then have somebody or some way corroborate where he says he was at the time of the murder?
I would be finding a way to rule them out, because if the prosecution doesn't, the defense is going to be arguing to the jury, or I'd expect them to be arguing to the jury, that he wasn't ruled out and there's reasonable doubt there. And I think an Iowa jury could definitely consider that to be reasonable doubt.
Here, and I don't think it's just his testimony, though, because he would have, self-serving testimony if he's going to say, well, I was somewhere else when all this happened. All right, well, don't they got to prove it, too, right? A receipt, surveillance video, or another person who may have been with him at the time.
They're going to have to do that because he's familiar with the farm. Now I'm thinking in my mind, well, okay, the victim's boyfriend has been here from time to time. He's familiar. So the state has to close, they have to close that. If they don't, they're going to leave it open, and I hope the defense walks right on in.
All right, now there's one other person who's involved in this case to a certain extent, but may not testify. We're talking about the victim's boyfriend's wife, Mrs. Frazier. Now, we heard today that she apparently knew about the affair but didn't believe it was taking place, that Todd Mullis had actually contacted Mrs. Frazier about what was going on between Amy and Jerry Frazier. I mean, she's involved here. I don't know if she's going to testify, but today the defense talked about it.
Called Jerry Frazier and said, hey, what's going on? Is there something going on? Frazier, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a nice guy. Amy wants the kids to get involved in showing pigs at fairs and stuff like that, and I help out a lot of people, and we got our regular contacts about the hog operation there at the Mullis farm. Don't worry, Todd. Todd even calls his wife, and she thinks Todd's crazy. She doesn't suspect anything, and I think it's pretty fair to assume that Jerry Frazier convinced his wife that Todd was a little wacky, and don't pay attention to him.
All right, so here's the question. Do prosecutors have to do the same thing with Jerry Frazier's wife, with the boyfriend's wife? Does she have to be eliminated, alibied for the time of the murder?
I think that's stretching it way too far out. I mean, I think you're getting way too far afield and you start chasing rabbits that you shouldn't be chasing at that point, and you lose the focus on your case as a prosecutor. I think you have to try your case. You can't get distracted by everything else.
You're not concerned about a juror who might have their own theory of the case?
I think it's important for them to prove that he did it, not that everyone else didn't do it. And I agree in that you start going down these rabbit holes of chasing every single person down, and you lose sight of who you're actually prosecuting. It's not every other person, it's him.
It's just two right now.
Well,
I mean,
for
that's
now.
not insurmountable.
But
It's
again,
at two,
but
the
if
list.
the defense puts up more, which I guarantee you they're going to put up more than the prosecution is sort of trying to rebound off of right now, that becomes their entire case now, is trying to, in a way, almost becoming the defense for every other reasonable alternative. And they really need to focus on him and why and how he did it.
All right. When we come back, there was a 911 call that was played in court today. It was made by the defendant himself. We posted it on social media. What a reaction from folks at home. We're going to react to your reaction when we come back.
Amy Lynn Mullis's online obituary describes her as someone who was always smiling. She worked as a nurse until she decided to be a stay-at-home mom to her 3 children. She also worked with her husband on their family farm. Amy enjoyed farming, fishing, gardening, and camping. She was also a hunter and a big Iowa Hawkeyes fan. Amy was always there for her family and her friends. The most important part of her life, her children. Amy was 39 years old when she was killed on November 10, 2018. She was pronounced dead at the same hospital where she once worked. Those who knew Amy say that they'll always remember her sparkling smile.
And everyone agrees that Amy Lynn was murdered. And the big question in this trial is, who did it? Well, we know who made the 911 call. That was the defendant, Todd Mullis. The jury heard it today. We posted it on social media, got some reaction to it. I want to play for you part of that 911 call. And as you listen to it, what are you hearing here? Is this a man who has tragically found his wife with a corn rake in her back? Or is this the voice of a murderer? Take a listen.
Amy. Amy. Okay, so what happened that she's not conscious or breathing? She fell on a fork. I had a fork on her. It was an old fork sitting in somewhere, and then she was halfway out of the barn. Like, she was calling to get out, and then Tristan yelled, and I ran over there, and she's laying there. And pulled it out of her. I couldn't get her out of the barn. The doors were narrow, and she's not responding.
With the force of a tractor at this moment, but she's unresponsive. We haven't pulled over alongside the road.
Was this like a pitchfork? One of them old corn forks.
Right. That's like a side fork.
Yeah, well, it's kind of got a curve on it. I don't know how that happened. I'm sorry about my cursing.
Okay. So is she bleeding?
I can't tell. When I seen it, she was face down.
Just pulled the pitchfork out of her. How old
I couldn't get out of the door.
An intense social media reaction today. People putting comments. Let's take a look at some of them now. We got Michelle, who listened to that and said, no emotion. I would be in tears if that was me. And I heard that tape. What do you think? Was there emotion there?
Emotion in the courtroom when he was sitting there in the courtroom listening to it?
Or on the call
phone?
itself?
No.
Either place.
I don't think so, but if you're replaying this, I don't see why he wouldn't be crying or having any kind of emotions in court. I mean, I would be paying attention to him if I'm in that jury box and watching, just to see his reaction.
Elaine writes, he sounded desperate on the video. Gosh, it'd be so hard to be on the jury. Does this make it more difficult, this 911 call?
I think he sounded frantic. To me, he sounded like he didn't know what to do, like he was scared, like he had found his wife with a corn rake in her back. I don't know if there's a way that you can appropriately react to that. I mean, you can say that he should be crying, but to me, being frantic and desperate for help is just as valid as
frantic is absolutely right. I mean, he's frantic throughout all of this. Your thoughts?
I think, too, just when you compare how he sounds on this and then how his son testified, it sounds like some families just aren't emotional. Some people don't emote a lot. That young man went through the testimony more rock solid than I've heard many adults be able to get through it. So maybe that's just how their family is. We don't know them. But, yeah, I mean, it didn't sound overly emotional to me, but it's just each person's going to be different.
Brian, did you hear desperation in that call, that 911 call?
I've been thinking about that and trying to interpret that 911 call. And you know what? I really think that as I watch it, I wish that there was a video of what was going on. It's hard for me to tell from the 911 call, because at times it seems like there's desperation, at other times there doesn't. It seems very chaotic at the very least.
An absolutely chaotic scene, and was described by the 13, now 14-year-old son in court today. Here's what Dolly had to say about the 911 call. Well, actually, she's going beyond that. I'm wondering why Dad put Mom's dead body on son to cover up the blood already there. Very strange, don't you think? Could the son have killed Mom? Again, we've got someone out there even thinking about that tonight, which to me is amazing. But how about the picture that was painted here where they're in the pickup truck, the son pulls it up and then gets in the passenger seat, and then Dad puts Mom right on top of the son as they start driving to get help here. Do you read anything into those actions?
I don't know. I think it's in the heat of the moment. You got to get where you're going. Where else are you going to put the person? Also, people who live on farms are a little bit different. I think you're used to dealing with blood and other things like that, so maybe it wasn't as shocking. And also, you're just trying to get it done. You're just trying to get her to help as fast as you can.
I agree, and I think maybe for the son to be able to help the mom if he could render aid in any way. We heard him testify earlier about him checking the pulse and checking for her breath. And clearly he has some idea as to, how to work around somebody who's injured. So maybe hoping the son could help the mom while he drives to the hospital.
Tiffany, what do you think about the fact that Dolly is saying, could the son have killed Mom? That, and that's what I'm wondering about. No one's going to argue it, I don't think, but a juror could still think about it.
Well, now you have to think about where was the son during that small window, right? Now we have to think about where was the son? Did he have an opportunity to go there and kill his mom and get back to wherever when his dad called for him? So it leaves open a lot of questions. I know, you may think about the son doing it, but you really have to have something substantial to show why the son would even do that.
Yeah, and again, sometimes the jury goes to a place that no one argues, and I've seen that in cases before. Here's what Chrissy had to say about the 911 call. Doesn't sound like he killed her. How about that? This is a piece of prosecution evidence. The prosecutor put this piece of evidence in front of the jury. Didn't have to. She didn't have to, but they chose to do that. And Chrissy says, doesn't sound like he killed her.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that audio actually helps the defense more than it hurts them. To me, and again, you can interpret it in 1,000 different ways, but to me, I hear desperation of someone who just lost their wife, who's afraid that she's going to die, and he's willing to do anything it takes to try to save her.
Wondering why prosecutors put this in?
I think you have to.
Right.
Why?
I think if you don't, you're leaving the jury going, but where's it? Juries want to hear things. They want to see things.
But now you're hearing the defendant. I mean, if I'm a prosecutor and this jury wants to hear the defendant, I want to hear him live in court so I can cross-examine him.
Well, but at the same time, I want to get that out. If I think somebody's going to use that against me, I want to be the one to put it out. I don't want the defense attorney bringing it out and saying how great he sounds, and of course he sounds desperate. I want to be able to put my spin on it as best I can.
Would it be admissible by the defense? To
Sure.
put this
I don't
in?
see why not. Yeah.
Yes.
Under what exception to the hearsay rules?
It's a statement of a party to the case.
Yeah, but it could be self-serving.
It could be.
I don't know.
I think
I
that
don't
would be
get
a
it
far-fetched
Yeah.
argument.
No, it's the defendant talking. If you want his self-serving statement, let me ask Brian. Brian, if prosecutors don't put in this 911 call, does the defense get it in?
Vinny, I think in Iowa it's going to come in under present sense impression. It's an exception to the hearsay rule. I think he can get that in.
Wow. All right. So you might as well get ahead of it. Wow. I got overruled. But Brian, you're in charge tonight of Iowa law. Here's what Linda has to say about it. Linda, is it possible that there could have been an ex-boyfriend lurking around the farm? Now, ex-boyfriend, that's interesting because there was an ex-boyfriend back from 2013, right? We know there was at least one in 2013. There's a current boyfriend who we expect to testify, but could there be someone else out there?
Leave it alone. Leave it alone. It's you're just reaching too far, and leave it alone. On both sides.
But Linda's thinking about it. Yeah. Linda's thinking about it. You don't want to feed that?
No, Linda's thinking about it, but no, I don't want to feed that. No, again, that's just too far-fetched. We're going too far. And then the juror might think on the flip side, well, why is the defense, going after this person? Maybe he did do it. Maybe, there's something that we don't know. Because you might start thinking that, right? The opposite.
Just let the juror linger with these thoughts.
I think it's important to explore these reasonable alternatives as to who might have killed her. You know, if it was a jilted ex-lover or a current lover. I mean, love makes you do crazy things, and that's a very sound theory, I think, for them to explore.
Yeah.
2013? From 2013, you think someone came and killed her?
Well, maybe there was someone else. We don't
Exactly,
know the exact history here. We know 2013. We know 2018. In between, we have no idea what was going on.
Right, and when you throw a name out there, it doesn't mean that's going to give the jury a reasonable doubt. It has to be a doubt for which a reason can be given from the evidence. They don't get to pick things out of the air, do they? Yes, they do. But as the prosecutor, you wrap it up with that and you come back with, there is no evidence of this other person. There is nothing there. Don't chase vapors.
Tracy, I thought he sounded very distressed on the 911 tape, but then I saw the broken handle on the corn rake, thinking emoji is up there. You see the thinking emoji. Now I think he was distressed because they got into a fight and it turned violent. I mean, it's a possibility. I don't know if we have evidence of that. I want to get a couple more of these comments. And Erica writing, I want to know why he pulled the pitchfork out. I learned in Girl Scouts first aid not to pull out anything that's stuck into a human. It causes more bleeding. This farmer ought to have known that, right? The testimony, though, Erica, we believe will be, or the explanation is that he couldn't get her out of the barn with the corn rake still in her, to enable to get her out of where she was in that red barn. That's why he says he took it out. And you heard that if you were listening on the 911 call. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but that's what he at least is saying. And Paula writes, if the rake was impaled in her back, how was she on her hands and knees? What about the other injuries? Nope, not buying it. Wow. And the testimony of being on the hands and knees was from the son, who testified when he saw her, she was on her hands and knees with the corn rake in her back. A lot of things to talk about here. Keep posting, folks, because yes, I do read them. Up next, who had a better day today inside the courtroom? It was day one. We had opening statements. We had the son testify. Was it the prosecution or defense? We'll let you know when we come back. Also, our latest Court TV podcast is available now. Seema and I take a closer look at the Skylar Richardson case and that second police interview where Skylar admits she tried to cremate her stillborn baby.
There is no way that you are going to convince me or have convinced me that this baby was burned, yet you got her to say she did it. And that's the biggest problem I have with all of this.
Wait, do you also have a problem with the cops in this interview trying to get her to say that there were signs of life?
And you can listen to our latest episode on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And someone said that doesn't even sound like me. No, that's me. I guess I was just closer to the microphone using my podcast voice. Does that sound more like me? You can always find it on CourtTV.com. The new episode drops every Thursday. Did a hog farmer kill his wife with a corn rake? Todd Mullis claims her death was an accident. But prosecutors say his internet search history tells a different story. We'll be live in Iowa for this bizarre case.
Amy Mullis was a young and beautiful woman, but little did she know her death would come that morning. In Amy's last moments on this earth, she would feel the corn rake that she was stabbed with in her back. She would feel that rake pierce her body. Amy was not happy. She was having an affair and she was planning on leaving the defendant. The defendant knew something was going on. He used a corn rake because he tried to make it look like a farm accident. He was hoping that people would just feel sorry for him and not ask any questions. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, and the trail of evidence leads to only one place, to where Amy's murderer sits across this courtroom from you today.
Tristan yells for his father. He comes, He finds her in the shed, horribly, with this corn fork stuck in her back. And he had Tristan help him get her in the pickup, literally laid across their laps, called 911, and proceeded to drive as fast as he could towards medical care. She was murdered. Horribly. But I believe that you will find that not only at the end of this case that there's a reasonable doubt about Mr. Mullis's guilt, but there's no doubt at all.
When my wife and I approached Amy, she said that she was planning on getting a divorce and she was going to leave Todd, and that he was going to flip out. She said she was worried about Tristan because him and Todd were close, and when she left, she knew that Tristan would be angry with Amy for leaving.
What did you observe about Todd and Amy's relationship?
We didn't see them a whole lot. They seemed to be working things out. He said, I'm not going to lose my farm and everything I've worked for.
At some point, did you lose sight of your dad?
Yes.
Do you know exactly how long your dad wasn't in your sight?
No.
What did you do?
I checked for a pulse on her neck and her arm, and I put my finger, or my index and my middle finger, under her nose to see if she was, if there was breath. We got her out of the car, and the operator, or the truck, I'm sorry, and the operator told us to give CPR.
And did your dad do that?
Yes.
Do you feel comfortable doing CPR?
I can try. I'll try anything.
His son, or Tristan, appeared to be fairly quiet and standing there kind of in shock from what I remember. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to him, other than I think we worked at trying to get him away from what was going on.
Dr. Thompson was concerned that there was too many holes on her back.
Would you say at that time things shifted from investigating a farm accident to perhaps foul play?
Yes.
Well, it was to look at the mechanism of injury and then determine the actual injury pattern on the decedent and see if that was a logical conclusion.
And how many puncture wounds did you find on Amy Mullis's body?
She had 6 puncture wounds.
And today, boom, they say, yeah, it's murder. And they took it another step in the openings and said, yeah, it's murder, and it might have been Jerry Frazier, basically is what they were saying. That her lover, the person that she was having the affair with, in the openings, it was blatant that that's what the defense is leading the jury to.
A lot happened here in day one of Iowa versus Todd Mullis, but who had a better day? Was it the prosecution or defense? Let's bring back in the think tank, and we begin in Dubuque, Iowa. Criminal defense attorney Brian Spanagel. Who had a better day, prosecution or defense?
Hands down, defense had a better day today. The prosecution didn't do enough to rule out an alternative theory. There wasn't enough evidence about forensics. There was nothing about DNA, about fingerprints being on the rake. There was nothing about blood splatter on the husband. I really want to know, did the son, did he see blood splatter on the dad when he came back? Was there any abrasions on the dad when he came back? Did he notice anything different about the dad when he came back? There's this lingering effect of the other people that were in the mom's life. Was there somebody else that could have done this? And I think the jurors are going to be looking at all of that. So today goes to the defense.
Tiffany Porter, prosecution or defense today?
I think the prosecution got this today. I think there was enough evidence to put in the jurors' minds that the husband could have committed this crime. Based on what you heard of the 911, you can infer that maybe he did it. He wasn't in shock enough. He didn't have enough emotions. But I think based on what we heard today, that the prosecution has a leg up right now.
Michael Bixon, who had a better day?
Get ready to be surprised. The defense.
What?
Without a doubt. Look, we're day one, and we're already starting to see the holes in this case. The issue with the time, how long he was gone, the issue with the lovers and all the other people involved in her life, how distressed he sounded on the 911 call. day one, and we're already starting to see holes. I think that's very bad for the prosecution.
All right. Dana Pagan, prosecution or defense today?
Prosecution. I think that their opening was stronger, and I know it's not evidence, but that matters to jurors. When they hear that, a lot of jurors, that's how they're going to set the tone for their whole case. I think the 6 holes still is an issue. I think the pattern of how the holes were placed in the body, getting that information out was very strong for the prosecution as well. Getting the parts out about possible motive for the murder. And the 911 audio, I've got to agree with Tiffany, that 911 audio, depending on how it's read, I think it was stronger for the prosecution.
All right. We got another day coming up tomorrow. Court TV crime and justice reporter Ted Rollins has a preview of what's coming up in Dubuque.
Vinny, coming up tomorrow, more testimony for the state of Iowa, bringing on more witnesses. We're going to definitely hear from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Amy Mullis. And then we also may hear from her lover, the man that she was having an affair with, Jerry Frazier, the man that the defense is pointing the finger at as a possible suspect. All that and more coming up. We're expecting a full day of testimony, that starting at 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern. Vinny?
All right. Ted Rollins at the courthouse for us. All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the next big trial. That's what we do on Closing Arguments. We take a look at what we're covering now and what is just down the road. This next case begins on Monday. A jury's already been selected in the wrong apartment murder trial out of Dallas, Texas. That's next.
The white former Dallas police officer who killed an unarmed black man in his home 1 year ago. 31-year-old Amber Geiger is charged with murder in the shooting death of 26-year-old Botham Jean. Geiger had just finished a 15-hour shift and was still in her uniform as she entered an apartment that she mistakenly believed was hers.
It is murder because if the roles had been reversed and Botham had come into her apartment and killed her, he would be under the jail right now and charged with capital murder.
Then she saw a man inside. She says she thought he was an intruder, and she fired her gun twice.
So far, this officer, instead of being arrested that night as she should have been, being placed in handcuffs and taken to jail, she was allowed to contaminate that scene that they're now allegedly discovering incriminating evidence completely unrelated.
One of the bullets hit Botham Jean in the chest as he stood up from his couch where he was watching TV in his living room. Botham Jean later died in the hospital.
We will not rest. This family cannot rest until justice is served.
That shooting sparked outrage and protests across the country as some believed it was racially motivated.
We are saying there's not justice at all if there is no justice for all.
Geiger could face life in prison if she's found guilty of murder.
This is the next big trial here on Court TV. Opening statements slated now for Monday, the 23rd. That is this Monday coming up in Dallas, Texas. The jury's already been selected, so they are ready to go. I want to take a moment tonight as we get you ready for this next big case here on Court TV to take a look at what the defense theory may be. You know, why did she end up at that apartment? Remember, Amber Geiger's apartment is on the 3rd floor. Directly above her is Botham Jean's apartment on the 4th floor, and somehow she ends up on the 4th floor at his apartment that night. She's been charged with murder. So we send a crew to the apartment to kind of retrace some of these steps. Let's take a look now at what the defense may argue was the reason why and how she ended up in Botham Jean's apartment.
According to an anonymous law enforcement official who spoke to Dallas Morning News, former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger ended a 15-hour shift and was still in uniform when she parked on the wrong floor of her parking garage at the Southside Flats. Geiger lived on the 3rd floor, but parked on the 4th floor of the parking garage. After entering the building, she then walked to where her apartment would have been and stuck her key into the lock.
I mean, I personally don't think it can happen. I think it can go to the wrong floor, but then you know automatically that it's not your floor. Like, I mean, I have went to the wrong floor before, but I knew that it wasn't my floor.
How did you know that?
The rugs and then these big lights, the numbers on it.
Reportedly, the apartment was unlocked, so the door opened, and when Geiger entered the apartment, the lights were out. She then saw someone moving in the dark and thought there was an intruder. The ex-cop then pulled her weapon and fired twice. One shot missing Botham Jean and the other one hitting him in the chest. 26-year-old Jean later died in a nearby hospital.
So I see the defense going to a very particular place in this case. Mistake of fact. She believed she was in her apartment mistakenly, and that's why she pulled out the gun and shot him. Can this type of defense win? Let me bring back in my think tank. We have a few minutes here. What are your thoughts? Has anyone here ever used mistake of fact as a defense? No. That your client believed that they were doing something, but they were wrong about what they were doing or what the situation was?
Not that I can remember.
An opportunity, no.
All right, so why? Why did she pull the gun? Is the best explanation in front of this jury that she thought she was in her own apartment?
I think that's the explanation you have to give. I think, so you're in reasonable fear of your safety if you're in your own apartment, if you're in somebody else's apartment, or you think you know, yeah, I think you have to argue that to have a justification to have shot.
I think the problem just is how hard can she sell that to them? Being on the wrong floor, and we heard earlier about the different colored lights and the carpeting, and it looks different when you're on the wrong floor of your apartment building. So how believable is it that she actually knew that?
But then you're arguing on the defense side that she didn't see all those things. Remember, it was a split. You can argue that it was a split second and that it was dark. This is the first time I heard that it was actually dark in there. So that might turn things around, that she heard an intruder, she was in fear of her life, and she just shot.
And mistakenly believed she was in her apartment, mistakenly believed there was an intruder, and then mistakenly believed that she had the right to shoot that intruder. When she didn't, because it was his apartment. He's just an accountant at home that night.